evening. My name is Kaisha Kierce, and I'm here to tell you why physician-assisted death is unethical. Do you think that death can actually be beneficial to someone? Critical care scholar Ewan Gallagher once wrote, "Death is beneficial to patients if and only if death is a better option. However, in determining whether patients are better off dead, we are critically limited by unknowable variables." That uncertainty is often ignored in today's conversations about physician-assisted death. According to Elizabeth Zhang, the increasing momentum towards legislation of physician-assisted death is in part a reaction to this public perception embedded in clinical reality and motivated by desire to regain personal control. As people age and their quality of health care declines, especially in terminal situations, many begin to see death as more of an appealing alternative than suffering. That perception has led to growing support for legislation legalizing physician-assisted death across the country. Today, as a person deeply invested in social justice and human dignity, I want to discuss why physician-assisted death is not an ethical practice. Physician-assisted death should not be legalized because it undermines human dignity, risks abuse of vulnerable patients, and distracts us from improving the care people truly need at the end of life. So, why has physician-assisted death gained so much support? Many people have begun associating dignity with choosing death, rather than seeing dignity as the right to refuse burdensome or futile treatment. Researcher Myung Ali notes that the idea of self-determination at the end of life being misunderstood as an individual's right to choose their own death. Instead of making informed care decisions that reflects a person's values, this misunderstanding grows because physician-assisted death is framed in persuasive, comforting language. Words like choice, dignity, and aid in dying shape public opinions in ways that make the practice seem compassionate, but the reality is far more complex. As Zhang warns, the framing of physician-assisted death can send social messages that devalue lives, that suggesting that there are certain states that aren't worth living. And critical ethicists emphasize that the central moral purpose of healthcare has always been and always should be to honor life and not end it. Gallagher and his colleagues argue that supporting physician-assisted death runs counter to the moral foundation of medicine, the incalculable and intrinsic worth of the human person. As you can see, physician-assisted death is extremely nuanced and ethically risky. So, how can we respond to the growing support of physician-assisted death? First, the real solution to what people call a dignified death is not a Hassan one. It is a high-quality palliative and hospice care. In the article Ethical Issue of Physician-Assisted Suicide and Euthanasia, Lee explains what society must prioritize is the institutional organization and improvement of the quality of hospice palliative care. When patients feel cared for, supported, and comfortable, the desire for physician-assisted death decreases dramatically. Second, ethicists in critical care insist that moral health care preserves life. To protect the integrity of medicine, we have to resist policies that would allow physicians to intentionally cause death. Even when the intention is framed as compassionate, we can't let it happen. Third, we must correct public misunderstanding. People need to know that refusing aggressive or futile treatment is not the same as choosing death. Through education, we can help others understand that dignity doesn't mean death. In other words, life should be made more comfortable, not prematurely ended. So what could our future look like if we commit to this path? Imagine a society where every dying person receives compassionate, holistic care, where pain is managed, families receive support, and no one feels abandoned or pressured into an early death. A society where physicians remain committed to healing and preserving life. In this future, no one ever hears that their life is not worth living. Every life is valued until its natural end. But now imagine the opposite. As Zhang warns, legalizing physician-assisted death risks normalizing the idea that certain lives, those with disability, chronic illness, or cognitive decline, are less valuable. What starts as rare options slowly becomes an expectation. Patients may begin to feel guilty for burdening their families or the healthcare system. And once society accepts doctors can intentionally end life, where does that line stop? There are two paths ahead, one compassionate, one convenient. So how do we ensure we move towards the compassionate option? To protect vulnerable people and preserve the ethical foundation of medicine, we must oppose legislation of physician-assisted death. Here's what we can do. We can support legislation that expands and strengthens hospice and palliative care. We can advocate for a public education that distinguishes between refusing futile treatment and intentionally ending someone's life. We can challenge misleading terms like death with dignity when we use or that are used to promote physician-assisted death. And we can encourage ethical medical practices that respect the intrinsic value of every human being. Together, we can ensure that people's final days are defined with comfort, compassion, and dignity without crossing boundaries. Thank you.